4 kilometers up, in air that holds half the oxygen you are breathing right now, there is a railway that should not exist. The ground it sits on is frozen solid, and every summer that ground turns to soup. So the engineers did something strange. They planted 11,000 steel pipes into the earth to keep it frozen forever. Men worked here where a healthy body starts failing after a few hours, and the machines lost a third of their power just from the thin air. How? This is the highest railway on the planet, and it was built across ground that engineers everywhere else are still afraid of. Tibet sits on a plateau the size of Western Europe, lifted 4 kilometers into the sky, and for most of the 20th century, the only way in was a road that closed whenever the weather decided it should. Everything a city needs, fuel, grain, steel, medicine, came in by truck across 1,000 kilometers of frozen nothing, and it arrived expensive, late, or not at all. China had wanted a railway here since the 1950s, and surveyors had been walking this ground since 1956. But every study came back with the same answer. 3 problems, and no solution to any of them. There is not enough oxygen for men to work. The mountains are too high for machines to climb, and the ground itself will not hold still.
4 minutes standing still, and I'm out of breath. Imagine laying steel here for 10 hours.
The first section, Xining to Golmud, opened in 1984 and stopped dead at the edge of the plateau because everything beyond Golmud was the part nobody knew how to build. Then in June 2001, they started anyway. 1,142 kilometers from Golmud to Lhasa, and of that, 960 kilometers would sit above 4,000 meters, higher than almost any permanent human settlement on Earth. 550 kilometers of it would run across permafrost, ground that has been frozen for thousands of years and that behaves like nothing engineers normally design for. The plan was to finish in 6 years.
We walked this line for years before anyone laid a rail. Every meter. On foot.
Permafrost is soil that stays frozen year-round, and the ice inside it is what holds the whole thing rigid. Warm it slightly, and that ice becomes water. The ground loses its strength and slumps, and anything built on top sinks with it. Then winter returns. The water refreezes and expands, and the ground lifts back up again. Not evenly, but in patches. A road can survive that. Badly. A railway cannot. Rails need a bed that does not move by more than a few centimeters, ever. And here they were trying to lay steel on ground that breathes up and down with the seasons. Worse, the plateau was already warming, so the permafrost they were building on was not even a stable enemy. It was a retreating one.
People think we're fighting the ice. We're protecting it. The ice is the foundation.
The answer was not one invention, but 3, working together. Where the ground was worst, they simply refused to touch it, lifting the railway onto bridges and letting the cold air pass underneath. 675 bridges on this section alone. About 160 kilometers of track that never rests on the plateau at all. Where they did build on the ground, they built the embankment out of loose, crushed rock instead of solid fill, so that cold winter air sinks into the gaps and chills the soil beneath. And then came the strangest part. Thousands of steel pipes driven upright into the embankments, each one sealed and filled with ammonia. In winter, the ammonia carries heat out of the ground and dumps it into the freezing air, and in summer, it shuts down by itself. No power, no moving parts, no maintenance. A refrigerator with no motor, running on the weather.
Every pipe here is a fridge with no motor. Thousands of them, running on cold air alone.
At 4,000 meters, the air holds barely half the oxygen it does at the coast. And that is not merely uncomfortable. It is a medical emergency waiting for a schedule. Fluid collects in the lungs and the brain. Judgment goes before people notice it is going. And a strong young worker can deteriorate faster than his crew can react. So they built a medical system before they built the railway. 17 oxygen-generating plants along the route, 25 pressurized oxygen chambers, and more than 100 clinics, roughly 1 every 18 kilometers of empty plateau. Crews worked in rotation and slept in oxygen-enriched rooms, and one tunnel was flooded with extra oxygen while they dug it. Over 5 years of construction, the official record reports no deaths from altitude sickness at all.
Up here, a headache isn't a headache. We pull men off the mountain for it.
Then there were the mountains themselves. The Kunlun Tunnel runs 1,686 meters straight through frozen ground, which means the rock they were cutting was held together partly by ice. And every machine, every light, every human body inside that tunnel was quietly melting the very thing keeping the roof up. They had to insulate the lining and cool the tunnel as they dug it. Higher still, the Fenghuoshan tunnel sits at 4,905 meters above the sea, the highest railway tunnel anywhere on Earth.
It's frozen rock. Our own body heat melts the walls. So we work cold, on purpose.
The line also cuts straight across one of the last great migrations left in Asia. Every summer, Tibetan antelope move west to give birth, and the railway was being laid directly through their path. So the route was bent away from the most sensitive ground. Dozens of dedicated crossings were built beneath and beside the track, the first structures of their kind ever built in China. And during the migration season, the work simply stopped. Machines were withdrawn, and even the colored marker flags were taken down, because the flags alone were enough to turn a herd back. In the first years, the animals hesitated at the crossings. By the second season, far more of them were walking through.
First year, they wouldn't go near it. Now, they walk under the bridges without stopping.
On the 1st of July 2006, the line opened, 5 years after the first machines arrived. The trains that run it are built like aircraft. The carriages are pressurized. Every seat has its own oxygen outlet, and the windows are coated against ultraviolet light that would otherwise burn passengers through the glass. At Tanggula Pass, the track reaches 5,072 meters, higher than any railway ever built, and the station a few meters below it stands completely unstaffed. There is nobody there, because nobody could reasonably live there. Freight that used to take days by truck now arrives on a schedule, and a journey that once defeated most travelers.
5,072 meters, oxygen tube at my seat, and nothing outside for 100 kilometers.
But the plateau is warming faster than almost anywhere else on Earth, and every year, the frozen ground the railway stands on gets a little less frozen. The pipes and the bridges and the crushed rock were designed to hold a line across ice that was supposed to stay. Whether that holds for another 50 years is now the real engineering question, and teams monitor the ground temperature along the whole route to find out. They built a railway on something that is quietly disappearing underneath it, and so far it is still standing.